Say your name again.
For the video. Okay. I'm Maggie Gilman. Today I'm going to tell you a story. This is the story of a young girl who took a gap year and traveled the world. She saw the stunning coast of South Africa, the rugged peaks of the Himalayas, the rolling hills of Thailand's organic farms, Cambodia's ancient ruins, Ecuador's 19,000-foot volcanoes, and the astonishing trail of the Incas. Not only were her eyes opened by the unique and passionate people in these places, she, with the help of TBB, was able to see something not directly in front of her eyes. She began to see that she was in this story. She began to turn the pages of her own tale and figure out what this story entails. This girl was me. Once upon a time, I was in the townships of South Africa. I was following caregivers who provide hospice care for many people with TB, HIV/AIDS, and other illnesses. There were several clinics set up in the communities that were stocked with medication, doctors, and high-end equipment. From the outside, everything looked fine, but day after day, I began to see that people were not getting better. Was it the medicine that was not working? No, the medicine was fine. It was not faulty, and the caregivers were giving it up properly. So that led me to the big question we came upon in South Africa. Why were people not taking the necessary steps to get better? After watching our patients not take their medicine regularly and not follow doctors' instructions, it became clear that there was a disconnect between the people giving and receiving medication. I soon became aware of the way patients viewed medicine, and it seemed to me as though the people I was visiting every day did not fully comprehend the concept of medicine or the consequences of not taking it regularly. And that was when I began to realize this. Western medicine is a result of the scientific revolution that has played a big part in Western culture, specifically here in the US. Over many generations, it has become a growing topic, a new field of interest, and a massive industry. The important thing about the scientific revolution was that it was a change in our mindsets. The way we thought from then on was through a different lens, a lens of science. Our reasoning about weather, illness, and how the earth worked radically changed. This is a change in our mindset, the change in our lens from which we see the world, and this is what I would refer to as our stories. Our beliefs, values, experiences, morals, and anything that affects our perception of life can be called our story. Now what I'm trying to get at is that most of our stories happily contain medicine. And so when we see sickness all over the world, and as an 18-year-old girl out of high school, it seems natural for us to set off to South Africa to help cure ill people. But little did I know that they live by slightly different stories. But wait, I've traveled before. I've lived for 11 months in Hungary. I've traveled all over Europe, been to rural Kenya. I thought I had seen other cultures. And now I understand that I might have seen other cultures, but I did not understand how that shapes the way people act and perceive the world. In South Africa, I felt this difference for the first time. Although in the moment I could not describe this realization I had come to, it was the starting point of this great journey of mine, this great story. Looking back on my trip, I have a better understanding of the events, and I have now formed one large realization about these stories I speak of. In my mind, I picture it like a bubble that is surrounding us on every side. It is thin and see-through with a hint of color tinting, kind of like your saran wrap plastic, guys. Each bubble is unique to each person because it is tinted with different opinions and experiences they then see through. These bubbles and these stories are how one experience in life can be interpreted, seen, and understood in completely different ways by every person. Now I finally understood a possible reason as to why medicine was not helping, and I finally understood why patients were not taking the necessary steps to get better. I believe it is because the phrase necessary steps is relative to us. These are the steps that we think they need to take, but based on what I saw and what I heard, the people in the townships did not think that's what they needed to take. Because medicine and our stories developed and evolved at the same time, they fit together perfectly. However, if a mindset is not familiar with science, then it makes sense why medicine does not fit so perfectly. This experience was the first time that I noticed a fundamental difference in the psychological makeup of people, and with my new awareness, we headed off to India. But wait, before I go into detail about India, I want you to take the plastic see-through wrap you have. And if you don't have one, there should be more in the back. Now please hold it over your eyes, kind of like a lens. Very good. I kind of want to take a picture right now. This is going to represent your personal bubble, like that I've been talking about. Let me remind you that the color tinting of your bubble affects the way you see the world because it is made up of your opinions, morals, and experiences. In my mind, I picture my bubble yellow. Now I'm going to put up a picture of the township in South Africa. Over this way. This is where I worked every day. However, the way I perceived it was very different than how others did. Look at it through your bubble and notice the color tinting, and think about what assumptions and opinions you have that make up your color. All right, now put down your plastic and try to think about the people living in this community and how they see their homes and their tight-knit community. How do your bubbles differ? All right, now back to my story. This part of the story takes place in Palampur, India, a small city at the foot of the Himalayas. I spent my days teaching English and math for 3 hours. The rest of my day was spent with my group, studying education. One seminar, we read a passage called "To Hell with Good Intentions" by Ivan Illich. This article describes one man's opinion towards volunteerists, which in some people's opinions could also be called oppressors. As a group, we explored our past education and learned about oppression today and what a liberating education is. This topic was heated in most moments, and we soon found that nearly everyone had a different take on oppression, and our roles here as possible volunteerists. There were many lonely days, and many days where I questioned how I turned out with such different views. I soon realized that every bubble, even if we are from the same place, is a slightly different color. Because in regards to education, the support or lack of support you received from your parents, the way your teachers taught, and the values your school held played a role in your color, your bubble's perspective about education. Feeling so separate, so distant, and so alone, I had the opportunity to figure out and unravel the stories that make up my personal yellow bubble. I began to look at the way teachers affected my story, the way society puts a story into my life, and how, until you question, you live a story that other people create. All right, I'm going to get up here again, and I'm going to pause my story once more and ask you to take out the bubbles. Put them over your eyes, and I'm going to flash up here a picture of Otsma and me teaching our second grade students. From your view, do we look qualified? Do we look like volunteerists? Do we look like we have been oppressed? Or do we look like we are oppressing? Now take off the plastic, and I want you to think as if you're a student in India. You have often had white volunteers coming to your school. You see celebrities on TV all the time, and some people around you seem to hold a Western culture as the ideal lifestyle. How do you view this picture now? How do you see Otsma and me? All right. And before we knew it, we crammed back onto the overnight train and made our way to Thailand. Thailand's days were spent working on organic rural farms. To add to my adventure even more, these stories of Thai people lived were even more eye-opening. Instead of seeing a home that was familiar, I saw one that I considered bare and empty. I always envisioned homes being filled with furniture and stuff, yet my family here clearly did not vision a home in the same way. They were things as simple as chairs, tables, ovens, and refrigerators. My host family, and many other host families, did not have these items. While in Thailand, I admired them for their simplistic lifestyle, but now have begun to question why they did not have these appliances. Was it because they could not afford it? Was it because they chose not to? Or was it simply that they had never considered a life with these items? I never asked, so I don't know where they stand, but got me thinking about my stories and questioning. From the time I was born till my time in Thailand, my stories always contained tables, chairs, and kitchen appliances. But why were those things necessary? Why are they necessary in our culture, in our society? Well, that's another story. So after South Africa, India, Thailand, and being far, far away from home, I finally felt like I had stepped outside my bubble. I had started to look into my yellow bubble and began to see how some of my stories shaped my perspective and actions. But little did I know that being outside my bubble would not only allow me to see other people's views, but everything beyond my bubble. Beyond our stories and beyond the lives we live daily. Finally, the earth came into sight. In Ecuador, we focus on how we impact the environment and about the complexity of every choice we make. I began to see my actions and how they affect a chain of people spanning all across the globe. I also began to see that I affect forests, dried up oil wells, icebergs, and many species of animals. Seeing my negative effect, I immediately wanted to change. I did not want to waste gas driving here and there. I no longer wanted to buy food that was produced halfway across the globe. And I no longer wanted to take part in a society that was telling me a story of nonsense. A story of consumerism. A story that keeps us sheltered in our own bubble and that does not allow us to see our impact on other people, let alone our impact on the planet. But life from my yellow bubble was all I knew, all I had ever known. It was the lens from which I had made all decisions. It affected my choice to come on this gap year, as well as all my decisions on the gap year. And even though I was being informed about my negative habits, my actions were not changing. My bubble stayed yellow seminar after seminar. I voiced my opinion, I said many times that I was going to change, yet my actions never followed. So if I know that I want to live a different life, and I want my actions to reflect this new knowledge, how do I go about changing? Even after Ecuador, and every day since, I have struggled to figure this out. Since I continue to buy new clothes, and continue to eat processed meat and junk food, I realize the key is not just about having knowledge. In order to change my actions, something else must change. Something in me had changed, though. I now have seen a whole new part of life that I had never thought of before. I realized my change when I thought back to Ishmael, a book we had to read before the trip started. When working on this speech, people told me that my new ideas resemble the ones in Ishmael, which is funny and shows a clear change because when I read Ishmael for the first time 7 months ago, the idea of stories did not stick with me. But now here I am giving you this speech, and after recently rereading Ishmael, I feel as though Daniel Quinn, the author of Ishmael, comes to a great conclusion about humans, our relationship with stories, and how that affects our relationship to Earth. He wrote, "There's nothing fundamentally wrong with people. Given a story to enact that puts them in accord with the world, they will live in accord with the world. But given a story to enact that puts them at odds with the world, as yours does, they will live at odds with the world. Given a story to enact in which they are lords of the world, they will act like lords of the world. And given a story to enact in which the world is a foe to be conquered, they will conquer it like a foe, and one day, inevitably, their foe will be bleeding to death at their feet, as the world is now. Even though I might have gained the ability to see stories in life, is it okay for me to continue letting our foe bleed to death at my feet? No, it's not. In my opinion, it's not okay for me to continue and just resume life like normal, like I had not been enlightened on this program. But I've gotten this far, and I am now aware. I've spent years stepping outside my bubble, looking at other bubbles, trying to see life from a tint of green or a tint of orange. But where does that leave me? Where do I go from here if I have learned and experienced all this stuff, but don't know how to change my story? If I know and am fully aware that my actions are hurting the earth and others in it, what more will it take for me to change? For me to break away from these stories that keep me tied into consumerism, that keep me trying to change my appearance to look like celebrities, and that tell me nature and I are separate. That you go into nature to take a walk or to go on a hike, but not that I am natural. Not that I am like the other animals. Not that I am a citizen of nature and earth as much as I am a citizen of these stories. Must I create my own story? Are there other people out there with stories that revolve around love, sacrifice, and human good? What does a story that lets humans live in accord with Earth look like? Does that radically change life as I know it? While I cannot answer these questions, I have a feeling that this journey might be about the process and not the solution. I continue to realize new things daily, and I continue to interact and converse with people that have their own ideas and their own bubbles to let me look through. I now have an ever-burning flame of curiosity about the physical things here on earth, the things we see, the crimes we commit, poverty all around us, and yet the intangible parts of the world as well. The hard questions about our purpose, our role, and our place here on earth. All right, time to whip out those bubbles again. And this time, I'm going to flash up a picture that I took in Ecuador. And I want you to think of the first thing that comes to mind. All right, I'm going to put up another picture, and I want you to do the same thing. Perfect. Now please take off the plastic, crumple it up, and throw it as far away as possible. Perfect. Without the color tinting of your bubble, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to look at your own stories and think about the opinions you hold. What is nature? Are you a part of nature? Are the people in this picture natural? What about the clothes they are wearing and the home they are in? Every person's words that came to mind were probably a little different. But personally, when I looked at the first picture, the words that came to my mind were home and family. Not until I was asked the previous questions about nature did I start to wonder why the words nature or earth never came into my mind. During this realization, it became clear and evident to me that I had always envisioned myself separate from nature. It was a story that I had always been told. When looking at the flowers, trees, plants, and mountains of the second picture, the words home or family did not come into my mind either. Therefore, I am left wondering if nature and I are separate, and if I had never considered Earth to be my home, does that explain why I've been willing to treat it so poorly? These questions are some that have radically changed my bubble and been a large part of my journey. Not once in the 19 years before I came on this gap year had I ever thought where I stand in nature, and from this point on, I will forever be searching for my answer. Now back to my story. Is me giving you this speech right now natural? As I've learned to do on TBB, I challenge you to find out your assumptions and challenge yourself to see it from another bubble. Like Quinn implies, humans can live in harmony with the environment, and I would go as far as to say that we are a part of nature. However, we are distinct from animals in the sense that we have the amazing capability to question and assess our actions. I even am able to comprehend the stories I am made of. So maybe this is all natural. Maybe we have the ability to think and question, that way we can find a way to make a change. But maybe we have the ability so we don't let ourselves destroy and kill the beautiful place and the beautiful people in it. Maybe the change has to be internal, in the mindset that we are separate from nature, or maybe it will take a great catastrophe for us to change. But maybe I'll figure it out, and maybe my color has changed from yellow to Yel-ple, a bubble I create with my stories and values, a mishmash of ones I've experienced. Or who knows, maybe this is just a story.
I appreciate you sharing the Daniel Quinn passage. I wasn't familiar with that before. I found it very powerful. Wondering, with respect to the conquering and the bleeding, what conquering and bleeding do you think will be easiest for you to reduce, and what do you think will be hardest for you to reduce?
Well, as I've found, when we left Thailand, I told myself going into the U.S. that I wasn't going to eat meat. And if you don't already know, beef is one of the meats that hurts the environment the most, and the whole process of transportation and it not being local, and it's a great long story. However, when I got to the U.S. and was in the airport, I had bacon and I had a burger. So then I go off to Ecuador, and in Ecuador I had this realization again where, okay, I'm going to go home and do the same thing. And Parents' Weekend came, and we're sitting in this little pub, and I tell my mom, oh, I'm not eating meat now. And not like local meat that I know where it came from. And she's like, okay. And we had this whole discussion, and I ended up eating meat again. However, here I am now, and after the polyface farm, I think I've finally changed my mind. But the little actions, the things that I've always had, kind of not really as like a crutch, but things that have always been a part of my life, and that I'll now kind of break away from, I think are going to be the hardest part to change. Also, just in Ecuador, I was trying to explore what in my life that is negative in the environment in some ways, and skiing is a very important part of my life. And just thinking about all the power that goes into it, all the water that's used to produce snow when we don't have a good snow season like this year, how for all my life, since I'm continuing to grow, we have to buy new equipment constantly. And the hardest part for me is that I can't get rid of these things. I'm now aware that I'm not going to live perfectly in harmony with Earth. And the hardest part for me is just accepting and knowing like that there's somewhere in between this crazy radical person that's like, I'm going to live as a caveman, which is what I said for a while. And then someone that's going to live without any consciousness. So that's going to be the hardest part. Thank you. Yes.
I'm curious about the beautiful coloring in your speech. Was that actually related to the lenses that you gave us? Was it?
You mean
on the paper?
Oh, on the paper? It just helps me to read a speech, I think. Yeah. So
The colors they look like the same.
they're pretty. It's for Easter, tomorrow. Yeah, no significant meaning. Well, thank you guys for coming.
John.